Welcome to the McTaggart Attack Podcast. I'm Kevin McTaggart, and in my podcast, I try to do like a variety of things. I try to help myself for the most part, but in helping myself, I hope that I inform, motivate, educate, inspire, entertain whoever's listening to this in some way or another. I decided a few weeks ago that one thing I could try to do as far as looking for content for my podcast is educate myself on things that I don't know what they are. For instance, last week, I didn't know what this whole QAnon thing was. So I looked up QAnon, and I wish that I hadn't, to be honest. But there's an episode where I talk about what the whole QAnon conspiracy theory is, so you can find that in one of my previous episodes. Thank you for listening to this one. This episode will be along the same lines because I want to look into something that I've heard a lot about recently. I think we've all heard about a lot recently. Most of us, anyway, have probably heard about this. And it pertains to President Trump. And they're saying how he violated the Hatch Act. And they keep saying, oh, he violated the Hatch Act. He violated the Hatch Act. Well, I hear this and I'm like, what's the Hatch Act? So I decided to spend this episode explaining what the Hatch Act is, so I can know about it, and hopefully anybody else that hears this can learn about it too. So I did what anyone or most people do when they look up things that they don't understand in this day and age. You Google it. My God, yeah, you Google it. So I Googled Hatch Act, and I felt a lot better at Googling Hatch Act than I did when I Googled QAnon last week. Didn't get any weird, crazy pedophile theories with the Hatch Act like I did when I looked up QAnon. Just saying. So I'm going to go over to Google. I have my program running, and I'm looking at Google at the same time. So the Hatch Act. I Googled it, and one of the things that showed up was the U.S. Office of Special Counsel. I think that's got to be the department that monitors the Hatch Act, because they have a whole bunch of information on the Hatch Act. Like, it says here that the Hatch Act, a federal law passed in 1939, limits certain political activities of federal employees, as well as some state, D.C., and local government employees who work in connection with federally funded programs. The law's purposes are to ensure that federal programs are administered in a nonpartisan fashion, to protect federal employees from political coercion in the workplace, and to ensure that federal employees are advanced based on merit and not based on political affiliation. I feel like after reading this, it seems like we violate the Hatch Act all the time. I don't know. Like, haven't we always been, like, violating the Hatch Act? Like, after reading that, it seems like people pick, like, presidents pick positions. They fill in positions of their cabinet and stuff. Are their cabinet like like is their cabinet exempt from the Hatch Act? What's exactly exempt from the Hatch Act? Let me go back to that website and Federal Employee Hatch Act information. Federal Employee Hatch Act information. Except for the President and Vice President, all federal civilian executive branch employees are covered by the Hatch Act, including employees of the U.S. Postal Service. Even part-time employees are covered by the Hatch Act, and all employees continue to be covered while on annual leave, sick leave, leave without pay, or furlough. However, employees who work on an occasional or a regular basis, or who are special government employees, as defined in this title that I'm not going to tell you what it is, are subject to the restrictions only when they are engaged in government business. Federal employees fall within two categories under the Hatch Act: further restricted and less restricted. Less restricted employees. Who are less restricted employees? Most federal executive branch employees, except those listed under further restricted employees, are considered less restricted under the Hatch Act. Less restricted employees may take an active part in partisan political management or partisan political campaigns. Scroll down to further restricted employees. Who are further restricted employees? Further restricted federal executive branch employees are prohibited from engaging in partisan political management or partisan political campaigns. Generally, further restricted employees are those employed in intelligence and enforcement type agencies, except employees appointed by the President, and with the advice and consent of the Senate. More specifically, further restricted employees are employed by the following agencies or in the following positions. And those are, like the Federal Election Commission, Election Assistance Commission, Federal Bureau of Investigation Service, Secret Service, Central Intelligence Agency, National Security Council, National Security Agency, National Intelligence Agency, all these intelligence agencies. I'm not going to read through all of them, but I'm going to put the link to this in the show notes so you can look at it yourself and educate yourself on this. But so basically the Hatch Act seems to the Hatch Act, from what I'm able to decipher, is that it promotes bipartisanship. You're not supposed to be partisan. Depending on what type of employee you are, you're not supposed to be, show any partisanship unless you were selected, unless you were chosen by the President or the Senate. Then you can be partisan. Okay, that kind of makes sense. So there's stuff about state, DC, or local employee Hatch Act information. The Hatch Act restricts the political activity of individuals principally employed by state, District of Columbia, or local executive agencies, and who work in connection with programs financed in whole or in part by federal loans or grants. Okay. So the Hatch Act covers any federal employees and local or state employees who are partially funded by federal government. Okay, so I think I've read enough there. I don't want to keep reading, but I think that clears up some things, some thoughts that I had about this, certainly. And people are saying that Trump violated the Hatch Act. Like having the Republican National Convention happen on the grounds of the White House, a federal government building, is to me definitely a violation of the Hatch Act. Definitely a violation of the Hatch Act. What are the penalties of the Hatch Act? That's a good point. I should look at that and see what are the what are the violations of the Hatch Act? Penalties. What can happen? Like, penalties. The penalty structure for violation of the Hatch Act by federal employees includes removal from federal service, reduction in grade. Oh, so yeah, all right, yeah, losing your job basically. So I guess why isn't anyone reporting Trump for violation of the Hatch Act or anyone that works for him? Because they're making federal employees lose their jobs by having them work for partisan means. They're making partisan people in that the departments that are supposed to be partisan work, for that are supposed to be non-partisan, like non-party related parties that positions that should not be affected by partisan politics, and they're making them do stuff like working the Republican convention, all these things. It's ridiculous. But Trump keeps breaking the rules apparently, and the Republicans keep saying, oh, it's okay for him to break the rules. It's perfectly acceptable for him to break the rules. Who cares if he breaks the rules or not? They're just the rules. Who gives a shit? So yeah, there's me reading about the Hatch Act. I think it cleared it up for me. And I think I definitely believe that Trump has violated the Hatch Act several times, but he does not seem to give a shit. So, hope you enjoyed this episode of the McTaggart Attack podcast. I was going to rip Trump further, but I'm trying to keep this episode as nonpartisan and not really give my opinion. I just wanted to read about the Hatch Act and let you guys hear what the Hatch Act is, because I didn't know what it was, and I read about it just now, and I figured out it certainly cleared up things for me, and I hope it cleared up things for you. But go ahead and vote for whoever the fuck you want, as long as it's the right choice, or the closest to right choice, but more like the left choice, if you know what I mean. And that's the bottom line. If you smell what the McTaggart Attack podcast is cooking.